So a few notices to mention for this week. Firstly, let me get them, that's going to be important. Firstly to say is there is another Zoom quiz today at 5 o'clock, our second Zoom lockdown quiz. All are welcome to join. If you haven't had the link already, please do message me on the chat or email me and I'll be able to send that out to you. And so yeah, all welcome to join today, including a round that I don't think is difficult, but we'll see. What do you think later? And there'll be a Christ the King themed round, kind of. So there's a little revision clue for this afternoon. The second thing to mention is that on the 6th of December, so in 2 weeks' time, we have our next connection service on Zoom. I'm going to unmute Catherine, if that's all right, because I realise I'd just like you to clarify, if you could maybe tell people a little bit about it. You might just need to unmute yourself, I'm afraid.
Yeah, hi. We used to have connection services monthly, and this was a time when we wanted to come together for an hour just to step aside, have a longer period of worship, but also to take time to hear what God's been saying to us and wants to say to us. To hear prophetic words, words of encouragement, words of blessing, words of challenge. So obviously we've been a bit restricted in this, but we felt we've done it once over Zoom and we wanted to continue this. So on Sunday the 6th in the evening, 7 o'clock on Zoom, we'll send out the details later. We're going to have a time together apart, and it'll be a longer block of worship, which I think we are all missing. Admittedly, it'll be you in your room singing your heart out, but we just wanted to give the Lord space. We wanted to give the Lord more time that we can worship him and be together doing that. So do join us. That would be great.
Great. Thank you very much, Catherine. So yeah, that's in 2 weeks' time, 7 o'clock, and the link will be sent out later. I should say all of this. Every Wednesday, I send an email to pretty much everyone at CNC and some people at Emmanuel as well. If you would like to receive that and you're not receiving it, if you message me, you can private message me your email address and I can make sure I add that in. We have a kind of a regular CNC email address, but we also have a temporary kind of lockdown email list as well. So even if it's just joining in for the period of lockdown, you're really, really welcome to do that. The final thing to mention is, well, there's two things actually. Sorry, it's never just one. Firstly, on Monday, we are hoping to launch our Christingle booking system and publicity. It was meant to be today, but I'm just holding back because I'm waiting to hear I'm hopeful there is going to be government guidelines on Monday about place of worship. The Christingle is definitely going ahead. It's definitely going to be live streamed on YouTube, but I'm hoping that we can have some people be able to actually attend in the building as well as online. So I'm going to hold back until I have that confirmed, but it will be launching this week. Christingle, 13th of December, 10 a.m. It's going to be really good fun. We're going to make up Christingle packs. So you will have your, whatever creates our Christingle in person. That they'll be delivered on Saturdays to your house if you live in Cheltenham or within kind of 3 miles or so of Cheltenham, and it's a really great time. I know that often friends and family who maybe aren't regular churchgoers find a Christingle service really helpful, so do mention that to people as well. That's going to be open to anyone who wants to come, and it should be a really, really good time. I should also mention the week after that, the 20th of December, Love Cheltenham, which are a group of churches in Cheltenham that are of all different denominations and everything, are putting on a carols in the car park of Cheltenham Racecourse. On the 20th, there's going to be a service at 4 and a service at 7. Unfortunately, you do need a car, but if you have a car and you would like to book on, if you can go onto the Love Cheltenham website, it should be really, really good fun. And I think, again, another good opportunity for people who if you've got friends and family who would maybe come along to a Christmas thing, but can't at the moment, I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. So lots going on actually over Christmas. So we'll pretty much have something on every week now, which is very exciting. Fab. That is all for the notices today. But as I said, everything I say on a Sunday morning, I also put in an email, which I know that we all love getting thousands of emails, but if you would like to receive that in a regular weekly email, if you're anything like me, if someone tells me something I won't remember, but if it's written down, I often do, do let me know, and I'd love to add you to that email list as well. So in just a moment, Martin is going to speak to us, but before that, Anne, who I'm trying to find, is going to bring our reading. Oh, here she is. She's waving at me. Anne, were you able to?
Reading is Psalm 122. I rejoiced with those who said to me, "Let us go to the house of the Lord." Our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. That is where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord according to the statute given to Israel. There stand the thrones for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels. For the sake of my family and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your prosperity. This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning, everyone. And Sarah, thanks for inviting me to speak today. As we've already reminded ourselves, we're doing a series on lamentations, and particularly thinking about the things that we're missing under the COVID restrictions that we have, the pandemic restrictions, the things that we're missing, and recognizing that it's right to lament. It's a spiritual principle. Half the Psalms, probably more, seem to be about that sort of thing. So it's about being honest and open with God about stuff that we're sad about. And today I'm going to think about lamenting worship, though. Actually, I was just going to say, when Sarah introduced this series, she talked about she was lamenting large-scale sporting events. And I have to say, as a West Ham supporter, I think large-scale sporting events have always had a tinge of lamentation about them anyway for me. But I think we all react to things in different ways, and there's some things that in this which we will find easier to do than others. But today I wanted to think about worship in general, but in particular, the thing that I've been missing specifically is what I would call gathered sung worship. So that's when we get together and we sing together as part of our worship. There's worship is far more than singing. Worship is far more than being together. There's all sorts of things that we can do which are part of our worship. But specifically, the thing that I've been missing is the specific thing that we're not been allowed to do, which is gathering together to sing. And we're hopeful that the current specific restrictions will change shortly, we think. But having said that, I think in my view, we're going to be stuck with a restriction on singing together for some time. I think there's lots of great things about singing in general. One of them is that it's actually quite healthy in a lot of ways. And but if you think of maybe at Christmas, we all get round and sing something like Ding Dong Merrily on High. Take a deep breath at the beginning of the chorus, and then you blast through all those glorias. And by the end of it, you're forcing all that stale air out of the dark corners of your lungs, which is quite a healthy thing to do. But obviously, if you're not wanting to share respiratory viruses, not such a good thing to do. So I think that probably for Ding Dong Merrily and High, and maybe many other reasons, I would reckon that we will probably be stuck with restrictions on singing together for some time. And this is something that I lament. And I started off thinking, well, I like singing, so no wonder I'm happy about not being able to do it. And I thought, well, is it as simple as that? Just that I'm not able to do something that I like doing. But the more I was able to reflect on this and what's actually happening when we're worshipping, but particularly what's happening when we're worshipping together, I think I've been sort of coming to realize maybe more and more what is so significant about the times when we worship together, and what I said is that gathered sung worship. So I'll explore that for a little while, what's sort of worship about, and having come to the conclusion that there's things that we're missing, I will talk a little bit about what we can do to try and offset some of that gap and deal with that. But I suppose just to say that these are my thoughts. This is how sort of worship strikes me and what I get out of it. But I know we all do these things in different ways, and so I'm going to try and keep this in the first person, if you like, because this is sort of my reflections on it. And if that's your story, then you know, when we'll share that. But I think already two of us have said that we're missing singing together this morning, so I'm obviously not completely alone in this. So what's worship about? Essentially, I believe the word worship, the root of that is worthship. It's about giving God his worth. You know, the foundation of worship is really about sort of proclaiming how great God is. We've done that already in the songs and what we've read this morning and in the prayers as well, I think. But it's primarily about stating how great God is. We talk about his greatness in creation and all the things that he's done. We look at the amazing things that he's done for us. We talk about sending Jesus as our saviour and coming into the world and getting involved, and all these different amazing things that God has done and that God is doing. And stating that is the sort of the starting point of worship, if you like. And if making those sort of statements, maybe what we might read or say, if that's the sort of the first level of worship, I think when we start to put that into a song and maybe add slightly more poetic language and a tune that makes it easy to remember, that's appropriate to the words, that takes the thing to a different level, and we get a slightly deeper and different experience of worship, and it opens that up a bit more than just simply a statement. So we could have a song that adds a lot to our worship, but if we listen to that, that's great. But if we sing that ourselves, then that becomes that bit more personal, and we're actually joining those words and making those words ours. So actually singing something out, if we're able to do that, is a really good thing. I think when we come together to sing, that puts another level on this again, because we're now starting to share that with other people. We're singing our praises to God, but we're also singing to each other and reminding each other of what this is about. I mean, the psalm that we read, it's a psalm of ascents. I sort of picked this not entirely randomly, but there are lots of psalms which are all about people gathering together to go up together to worship God in those days at the temple. I picked this one because I quite like it. It turned out to be our morning reading. In those of you who do the Scripture Union notes will have spotted that as well. That was an aside, wasn't it? I'm looking aside at the psalm here. Yes, so gathering together is we're singing to each other when we gather together. So we're singing to God, but we also are singing to each other and sharing that and encouraging each other. And you know, as we do with songs, it sort of helps us to look at things in a different way. So we'll understand things differently and have a different angle on things. I think there's slightly more to it than that as well, because I think when we're sharing something like a song in worship, then to some extent we can sort of be holding each other accountable for that. And if we're saying within this song, yes, God, I believe that's the kind of God you are, a God who loves us and God who gets involved and who does things, then we're saying, well, I'm committing to living my life on those grounds. And actually, if we're saying that publicly and singing it with our Christian friends around us, I think there's an element in which we're holding each other accountable for that. So that's why you get an extra depth and another layer on top when we start to do these things together. Now, I'm sort of talking about levels here, and I suppose what I wanted to be sort of careful about was the fact that it's great to state how good God is, maybe to read that or to have that written down. It's great to put that into a song. It's good to be able to sing that ourselves. It's great to be able to share that with others. And it's not that these are necessarily better than other things, and different people will use stuff in different ways, but I think it adds a different level to what we're doing and to our Christian experience. And I was thinking, through this. If I have to do anything like this, when I go for my run is always good thinking time for preparation. I should say my run, which I do twice a week, is only ever half an hour. So in theory, there should only be another 23 minutes of this left if we stick to time. But it occurred to me while I was running, it was dark, by the way, so I don't know why this came into my mind, but this is maybe a bit like a rainbow with these different layers. And so when we're talking about adding different layers on, it's maybe like the different colors within a rainbow. And it may be that a particular form of worship works for you, and that's great. And that's maybe like a single color, maybe it's green, and which is lovely on its own. But as we sort of add these different layers, and particularly as we're sort of worshipping together, then that brings the different parts of the spectrum together and adds another richness to that. I don't know if that sort of makes much sense to you. It seemed to fit to me. And I suppose what I wanted to stress was that it's not that, well, I think that all these things are valid forms of worship, but I suppose most of them we're actually able to do even through the medium of Zoom, but the level of being able to share in worship together is clearly something which we've lacked. And so I thought, well, why is it, other than the fact that I like that and I'm therefore disappointed, what actually am I missing out on? And it seems to me that when we're worshipping, and at whatever level that might be, when we're worshipping, we're praising God for how great he is. And whilst that's going on, what happens is our view of God expands and we get to see more of what God's like and experience more of what he's like. And conversely, if we're not worshipping as much, our view of God gets that bit narrower. And so I think that apart from the fact that I'm lamenting because I'm missing something that I like, actually, if I'm not spending enough time in worship, my view of God gets narrower. And consequently, what my Christian experience gets narrower, and the extent to which I can be useful to God gets narrower, because I'm not looking for him to be intervening in situations and looking to see what he's doing. So actually, this is more than just lamenting something that I don't, that I'm missing, that I like. Actually, this is about something which fundamentally can change our Christian experience, I believe. So it's really important to make sure that we are taking opportunities to worship that we do have, to make sure that our view of God continues to expand and that we can see, sort of fresh insights into what he's like and to what he's done. So, but we've sort of got as far as worshipping God and doing that together. I think there's actually another layer that I would move on to. I'm not sure if we're not quite into infrared yet, but we're sort of moving up the spectrum. And that's that when we're spending time in worship, I think we can become particularly aware of God's presence with us. And there are other situations in which we can be aware of God's presence and enjoy just being with him without having to sort of do anything. But I think within worship, that is, and particularly when we're worshiping together, seems, for whatever reason, to be a time when I think we can be often quite conscious that God is with us. And I think this is, for me, it might be that you're sort of aware of it and maybe realize afterwards that was the case, and you think, oh, that was good. And why was that? Well, it's because I really felt like God was with us at that time. But I'm not sure we always sort of think much about how that's happened or why that is or what's going on there. There's probably a few things we could say about this, but I suppose just one thing which I would say is that I think when we're conscious of God's presence, that's not because we've been whisked off to some other place or because God has suddenly come down to where we are necessarily. In some way, both of those things, I think, are things that happen and are valid things. But I think our normal experience of feeling close to God, maybe in a time of worship, is because, well, God's here anyway. Jesus is with us. His Spirit is in us. So if we're feeling close to God, that's because we've had some sort of, that maybe the curtains are drawn back or that our eyes are opened to realize that he is here. God's here with us all the time. We're just more conscious of it sometimes than others. And I think during corporate worship, gathered worship, is a time when we can be more aware of God's presence with us. And I think this is a bit different to what I was talking about in proclaiming how good God is and broadening our view of him. I think this is a time when we're just sort of aware of God being with us. This is more about when knowing how much God loves us sort of seeps down to feeling and experiencing how much God loves us. And I think in the last series we were doing, we talked about head and we talked about heart and other things, but it's almost like this, the layer that this adds on is where if we're in God's presence and just being with him, then we do feel that more personally for ourselves as well as what we know. But I think it's actually more than that even, because when we spend time with people, we find out what they're interested in and what they're concerned about and what what's important to them and what things maybe make them sad as well as what things make them happy. And I think it's the same if we're spending time with God, and we will get to understand more about not only just about feeling how much God loves us, but I think if we're in God's presence more, we get to feel what he thinks about the rest of the world and those around us, and maybe the mess that we've made of some of his creation, and but the things that make him sort of happy as well. But I think if our aim is to become more like Jesus and to be able to work for God and make a difference where we are and be his hands and feet, being able to connect with the things that matter to God and to be able to understand how he sees situations is really important. And I think so that again is something which I said there are other ways to feel close to God and be in his presence, but if spending time in worship with others is a way in which that often happens, then that's something where potentially we could be missing out as well. And if we spend time with people, we get to understand that. If we don't see somebody for a while, then we do tend to lose focus about what things are important to them. And it'll be the same with God. So if we're not spending time in God's presence, just sort of being with him, then I think we will lose sight of how God views the world and how God cares about those around us. So again, through all those levels, and it's really, I think, things which can affect our Christian experience and our effectiveness for God. Probably not in a sort of an overnight change way, but I think it's a gradual thing that sort of that build up when we are worshipping regularly, and it's a gradual thing that will sort of trickle down if we're not careful, if we're not. So there's obviously some things we're missing out on there, and there are lots of things that we are still able to do at sort of different levels within that spectrum. As I say, each colour is perfectly valid on its own, and that's great that we're able to do some of those. The more different ways we can join that together, the broader the spectrum of worship can be. And so I'll talk a bit about, I'll just have a drink first. But some of the things that we can do to capture that back. But before that, it also struck me that we are sad because we're not able to worship God quite in the ways that we would like, and we're lamenting that. I believe that God is sad about that as well. And I think that God loves it when we worship him. He's creator God, and he's made us to be creative. And he loves it when we are creative and we do stuff like that. And I think that he loves it when we worship. And we may think that, I sort of think, well, if I'm leading things, I've maybe got away without playing too many wrong notes this week and stayed roughly on key. And sometimes you think that things have gone technically better than others. But actually, God really loves it when we worship. And that's not necessarily because of our brilliance, it's because he loves us. And a sort of a picture of this might be, I don't know if you've ever been presented by a piece of work that a child has done, maybe a picture or something they've created. and that can really touch your heart, and you have a warm feeling about that, and you might stick it on your fridge. And that's not because it's the greatest ever representation of a dinosaur or a unicorn or whatever that there ever has been. It's because of the child who's created it to you and who's given it to you. I mean, interesting, we've probably still got the warm feeling when the kid's gone off and is doing something else and has forgotten all about it, but that feeling stays with us. And I think it's the same with what we offer to God, that actually that's really worth something to him. And I'm not sure where I got this image from. Somebody must have said something at some stage, but there's an image of God in heaven with countless angels worshipping him all day long, however long a day might be. And yet he says to his angels, oh, hang on a sec, guys, I just want to take 5. I just want to listen to what my children at Cheltenham Network Church are doing this morning. And with all the, yes, I suppose we join with the angels in praising God, but actually that our worship is of real value to God. And so I think that he is lamenting, or he laments when we are not able to worship as fully as we should. So what are we to do about this? Well, I think there's as I said, I'm talking very specifically about the gathered singing bit, but we should be taking opportunities to do all the other things along the road, whether that's using songs ourselves and what we can share through the wonders of Zoom on Sunday morning and things like that. But when we do get a chance to get back together and we're still not singing, I suppose there's probably just 2 things that I would say that maybe we should enhance as well as humming behind the mask. One might be what we do physically, because clearly some songs have actions, others lend themselves to some gestures. I believe some Christians are learning a bit of sign language in these times, because whatever we can do to express the sentiment or the what the song is talking about, that all adds another layer again to how we're able to express, whether that's expressing our love to God or describing what he's doing. And so I think anything that we can do physically, I mean, there are people who would, Christians who would enjoy the medium of dance, but I suppose what I would say is that when we are back gathering together, there's the singing with our voices, but there's also the 2 meters. So I suppose we have to be a little bit cautious about how wide and expansive we can be with this. But I think expressing physically what's going on in the song is very valid. It may be that we need to sort of put our hand up to proclaim that God is who he is, or we might need to open our palms to receive what he's offering us, or to offer ourselves up to God. There are songs where actually it's probably more appropriate for us to be kneeling on the ground rather than standing up to sing them. We traditionally stand to sing, but what we do with physically with our posture and our gestures can add to the meaning of the words that maybe we're humming. And I suppose the other thing that I would maybe want us to be, or I would try and be conscious about, is what I would call the sort of song that we're singing in our hearts. And a while ago I did a piece in church about this, where I took the line from the song that we sing, I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice. And the line is, may it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. And I asked myself the question, what is God's ear like? And came to the conclusion that I believe that God does hear the sound waves that come out of our mouths. And actually, that's the bit that seems slightly, I'm not quite sure how he does that. But I believe that happens, and so I think God can hear what we're actually singing out, but I think he also tunes into the song that comes from our hearts. If you stand in a room of people singing, which I have done from time to time, if you listen, there some voices will come out louder than others, and some will be might add a lovely harmony or a descant to something. and other voices might be quieter. You might see somebody and you can see their lips moving and you know they're a lovely singer, but actually you can't quite hear what they're saying because their voice is very soft. So there's quite a variety of the physical sound waves that we produce, and I think it's probably the same with the song that's coming from our hearts. I know that I personally I can sing a song with all gusto, but actually if I'm distracted and thinking about something else, the song that's actually coming out of my heart will be quite muted. I'm sorry to say, though I try not to. But and it can be the other way around. Sometimes we might find that maybe the emotion of a situation or something that we associate with that song can be so much that we're not actually able to pull the words out of our mouths, but we're still singing it from our heart. And I think to try and tune in, if you like, to the song that's coming from our hearts is maybe a helpful discipline to do, particularly whilst all we can do is hum behind a mask or sing to to our screen in front of us, because that's, I say, something that that I think that God tunes into just as much as we tune in to the physical sound waves that are rolling around the room. So so all is not lost, and it may well be that we can find opportunities to do things, or maybe just to tune into different sorts of aspects of our worship now during this time, that maybe when we get back together might even enhance what we're doing a little bit. And I know I'm always optimistic about these sort of things, but I genuinely think that there are things that probably practices that we're picking up now that that will actually enhance what we do and the way in which we worship when we do get back together, which I do believe will happen one day, but not this Christmas. Okay, there was actually one I really ought to write notes. It's because if you plan a talk while you're running, you probably end up without written notes. The one thing that I was going to say right at the beginning, and this is unusual for me, I had a title for this talk. A little bit late. My title was "No Singing Aloud," and because obviously we are not allowed to sing aloud, I could have referred to that as we went through, but there we go. It would have been written on the top of my my PowerPoint along with the rainbow if I'd ever made one. So bless you all, and I've appreciated worshipping with you, and there is still a sense in which I feel that we are gathering together with this, and I do look forward to the time when we can make a little bit more noise together.
Amen. Thank you so much, Martin. I am so much really helpful stuff in there. I'm amazed you are able to write a talk whilst running. That is something that I normally just think, am I going to die? Which I'm not. I was really struck by that suggestion that Martin talked about at the end of us, even when we can't sing out loud, being able to worship with our hearts. And it reminded me of a verse in Psalm 66 verse 4, which says that all creation worships God and sings praises to him. They sing praises to his name. And there are so many examples in the Psalm of creation praising God. And I think it's so encouraging in a time where we might go into a kind of traditional church setting and not be able to worship in the way that we're used to remember that whatever we are offering is joining in with the praise of creation, that we are still playing our part in this creative worship. Jesus on Palm Sunday, as people are crying out to him as he enters Jerusalem, the Pharisees say, "Can you make them be quiet?" And he says, "No, because if I make them quiet, the rocks will cry out." We have a God who is so worthy of our worship, and our however we feel our ability is to do that at the moment, that doesn't undermine what is the worship that is happening. So I just love that idea of worshipping from your heart. So thank you so much, Martin. I'm gonna we're nearly at the end of our service, but I just thought I would read as we finish a little bit of Psalm 66, and I hope that it would be an encouragement to us, particularly for those of us who are really missing worshipping, and maybe this is the first time in our lives we've not been able to worship in the way that we're used to, that maybe that that image of the rainbow, our particular way of worshipping, is really not happening. And just just read a few verses and just remind ourselves that however we're able to worship at the moment, however that works, that God is still as proud as the father who's really proud of his child's drawing on the fridge. Shout for joy to God, all the earth. Sing the glory of his name. Make his praise glorious. Say to God, how awesome are your deeds. So great is your power that your enemies cringe before you. All the earth bows down to you. They sing praise to you. They sing the praises of your name. So Lord, in this time where we can't worship in the way that we're used to, I pray that you would help us to partner with all of creation, with our Christian brothers and sisters across the world, to worship you in the ways that we're able to at the moment. And thank you that you love us so much that however we can worship is acceptable to you. So I pray you would just help us in this time. And I pray also that as we gather back together eventually, we know there will be a time where we'll be able to worship again in the ways that we're more used to, that we would have a new dimension to it, because we will remember what it is that we love about it. And I pray that you'd help us to never be complacent again about what it is to worship you, and what it is to be able to choose to worship you in the ways that we are able. And we remember as well, God, today the persecuted church, people for whom maybe they've never been able to praise out loud because that's something that's too dangerous. So I pray, God, that you would remove our complacency and remove our comfort at this time where we're uncomfortable in worship. Pray that it would grow us and form us into following you more deeply. Amen. So at the end of our service today, we'll finish by saying the grace together, and then if you'd like to stick around, we'll be doing breakout rooms, but also if you need to nip off, that's absolutely fine as well. So let me unmute everybody, and we'll say, may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit
Holy Spirit.
Amen.